My name is Clara Whitmore, and I was 28 years old the night I realized that respect matters more than love. It was my wedding day, the kind of night people dream about, where everything looks perfect from the outside. The ballroom was glowing, with soft golden lights, crystal chandeliers hanging above like stars, and gentle music filling the air while guests laughed, talked, and celebrated. Every table was covered in white silk and decorated with fresh roses, making the entire place look like something out of a fairy tale. And there I was, standing in the middle of it all as the bride, smiling, greeting people, thanking them, playing the role everyone expected me to play. But deep inside, something didn't feel right. I stood near the stage, holding my bouquet tightly, trying to steady my breathing as my hands trembled slightly. Guests kept coming up to me, complimenting everything, telling me how beautiful the wedding was, how lucky I was. I smiled and nodded, but that strange feeling inside me wouldn't go away. Then I saw them, my parents. They were standing quietly among the guests, not trying to stand out, just watching me with pride. My father gave me a small nod, the same nod he had given me my whole life whenever he wanted to say you did well. And my mother smiled softly, her eyes filled with happiness. For a moment, I felt calm. They were here, and that should have been enough. But then I noticed something. My father kept adjusting his sleeves again and again, like he didn't know what to do with his hands. He looked uncomfortable, like he didn't belong there, and that feeling hurt more than I could explain because he had never made me feel out of place in my entire life. He was a simple man, not rich, not powerful, but strong in every way that mattered. He had spent his entire life working hard, fixing machines, taking whatever job he could find, just to make sure we had a decent life. His clothes were always clean, but never expensive, and he never cared about brands or status. To him, respect and honesty mattered more than anything. Growing up, we didn't have luxury, but we had love, and that was enough. I remember nights when the power would go out and we would sit together in candlelight, my father telling stories, my mother laughing softly, and me sitting between them, feeling safe and complete. We didn't have everything, but we had enough, and I was always proud of that. My mother was just like him, kind, quiet, and selfless. She worked long hours without complaining, always putting me before herself. She never bought anything for herself, but somehow I always had what I needed and even what I wanted. Not once did they make me feel less than anyone else. And yet, standing there that night, something felt wrong. Then I heard my name and turned to see Ethan, my fiancé. He looked perfect in his suit, confident, calm, completely at ease, because this was his world, a world of luxury, power, and status. He smiled, held my hand, and told me I looked beautiful. I smiled back and thanked him, and for a moment, everything felt normal again. I met Ethan 2 years ago in a hospital when my father had been injured at work. I was sitting outside his room, scared and overwhelmed, when Ethan sat beside me. We started talking, first about small things, then deeper conversations. Over time, we grew close, and I believed he was different from the kind of rich people I had imagined. He was kind, patient, understanding, or at least that's what I thought. When he proposed, I didn't hesitate because I believed he loved me for who I was, not for my background or status. He once told me his family didn't matter and that he chose me, and I believed him completely. But his family was different. From the very beginning, I could feel it in the way they looked at me and spoke to me. They were polite, but never warm. Their smiles never reached their eyes. They were the kind of people who valued status and connections above everything else. And to them, I had nothing to offer. I wasn't from a powerful family. I didn't bring wealth or influence, and I didn't carry a name that could benefit them. I heard things, quiet comments hidden behind smiles, that Ethan could have chosen someone better, someone more suitable. His mother once said in front of me that in families like theirs, marriage wasn't just about love. His father didn't say much, but his silence said everything. To them, I didn't belong. Still, I stayed quiet, stayed respectful, convincing myself that things would change after the wedding and that love would be enough. I looked at my parents again, still smiling, still trying to enjoy the moment, and then I noticed something strange. Ethan's mother was staring at them, not smiling, just watching. Then she leaned toward her husband and whispered something. He followed her gaze and looked at my parents too, and something about his expression made my chest tighten. I told myself I was overthinking, that it was just nerves, but the feeling didn't go away. Then dinner began, and guests started moving toward their tables. The main table filled quickly with Ethan's family and important guests, people who clearly belonged in his world. I waited, expecting someone to guide my parents there, but no one came. Instead, a waiter approached them, spoke politely, and pointed toward the back of the hall near the kitchen door. My heart dropped. I whispered no under my breath and took a step forward, but someone stopped me and pulled me into photos. I turned again and saw my parents quietly standing up and following the waiter, not asking questions, not complaining, just accepting it. I felt like I couldn't breathe. Minutes passed, maybe longer, I don't even know, but something inside me felt very wrong. Finally, I couldn't ignore it anymore. I told Ethan I would be back, and he nodded without paying attention. I walked quickly through the crowd until I reached the back of the hall, and then I saw them sitting at a small plain table near the kitchen door, with no decorations, no candles, nothing like the other tables. Every time the door opened, loud noise and heat rushed out. It wasn't a place for guests, it was a place people ignored. My father sat straight, trying to act normal, but his hands were clenched tightly, and my mother tried to smile, but her eyes were already red. I called out to my father softly, and he looked up immediately, forcing a smile and telling me I looked beautiful, like nothing was wrong. I asked him why they were sitting there, but before he could answer, a voice behind me spoke, and in that moment I knew everything was about to change. Before my father could answer, a sharp voice came from behind me, smooth on the surface but carrying a quiet arrogance underneath. And the moment I turned, I saw Ethan's mother standing there with a group of elegantly dressed women, all watching. Youths with faint smiles that didn't feel kind at all, more like they were enjoying something they shouldn't be. And she tilted her head slightly as if surprised and said, "Oh, so you finally noticed," her tone light but cutting, and I felt my chest tighten as I looked back at her and repeated slowly, "Why are they sitting here?" trying to keep my voice steady even though something inside me was already starting to burn, and she gave a small, almost amused smile before replying, "We thought it would be more comfortable for them here, away from the main crowd, less overwhelming." And the women beside her let out soft laughs as if it was some harmless joke, but nothing about it felt harmless. And before I could respond, Ethan's father stepped closer, his expression calm but his eyes cold, and he said in a low voice, "Clara, let's be realistic. Not everyone fits into an event like this," and his gaze shifted briefly toward my father before returning to me. And in that moment, the air around me felt heavy, like every word was pressing down on my chest. And then one of the women beside them leaned slightly forward, not even bothering to lower her voice as she said, "Did you see his jacket? It looks like it's been worn for years." And another woman laughed softly, adding, "And those shoes." I'm honestly surprised he came dressed like that, and the quiet laughter that followed spread like a ripple, reaching nearby tables, turning into whispers, into glances, into something humiliating that couldn't be undone. And I saw my father lower his head just slightly, just enough that anyone else might not notice, but I did. And that small movement hurt more than anything they said. And then Ethan's sister stepped forward, smiling brightly like this was all entertainment for her, and she said, "I was actually worried he might sit at the main table and confuse the staff." And that line triggered louder laughter, people nearby now openly reacting, turning their heads, watching, judging, and my chest tightened so much it felt hard to breathe. And another voice added from somewhere behind them, "At least now. He's closer to where he belongs," and more laughter followed, louder this time, careless, cruel, and I looked at my mother, whose hands were now trembling as she reached for her glass. But her fingers shook too much to hold it steady, and her eyes filled slowly with tears. She was trying so hard to hold back, blinking quickly, forcing herself to stay composed, to not ruin my moment. And then Ethan's mother spoke again, her voice calm, almost satisfied. They should be grateful they were invited at all. And that sentence didn't just hurt. It shattered something inside me completely. And without thinking, I turned immediately, searching for Ethan, because in that moment I needed him to say something, to stop this, to stand beside me. And I found him standing not far away, watching everything. And for a second, our eyes met, and I waited. I waited for him to step forward, to speak, to do anything, but he didn't move. And then his sister leaned toward him and whispered something I couldn't hear, and I saw it happen, slowly, clearly. Ethan smiled, and then he laughed, not awkwardly, not uncomfortably, but genuinely. Like this was all normal to him, like this was acceptable. And in that exact moment, everything inside me went completely still. The anger, the confusion, the doubt, it all disappeared, replaced by something else, something cold, something clear. And I looked back at my parents, my father sitting in silence, my mother turning her face slightly to hide the tear that had finally slipped down her cheek. And that was enough, more than enough, because suddenly nothing else in that room mattered. Not the decorations, not the guests, not the wedding. Nothing except what I was seeing right in front of me, and I took a slow breath, then another, steadying myself, and without saying a single word, I turned and started walking, not rushing, not hesitating, just moving forward with purpose, weaving through the tables as people began to notice, whispers rising around me, confused voices asking what was happening, but I didn't stop, not until I reached the stage, where the microphone stood waiting, and for a brief second I just stared at it, feeling the weight of everything that had just happened, and then I reached out, picked it up, and the sound echoed across the hall, cutting through the music as it suddenly stopped, conversations fading into silence, all eyes turning toward me, and I could feel the entire room watching, waiting, but this time I wasn't shaking anymore. This time my voice came out steady, sharp, and clear as I said one word that silenced everything. Enough. The moment my voice echoed through the hall, everything went silent. The music stopped completely. Conversations died instantly, and every single person in that room turned to look at me. And I stood there holding the microphone, no longer shaking, no longer confused, just completely clear about what I was about to do, and I slowly looked across the crowd before speaking again. My voice steady, but filled with something they hadn't heard before. All of you have been enjoying this evening. Laughing, celebrating, pretending everything here is perfect. And I paused just long enough for the silence to grow heavier, for the discomfort to settle in before continuing. But I think it's time we stop pretending. And I turned my gaze directly toward Ethan's family, watching their expressions slowly change, confusion turning into unease, and then I raised my hand slightly and pointed toward the back of the hall. The man sitting there, the one some of you found so amusing, the one you laughed at because of his clothes. My voice didn't shake, but there was a quiet fire in it now. That man is my father, and the room felt even quieter, if that was even possible. He spent his entire life working with his hands so I could stand here today, so I could become something, so I could have a future, and I took a slow breath, letting every word sink in. He never asked for luxury, he never needed approval, but he deserves respect. And then my eyes shifted to my mother, and my voice softened slightly, and the woman beside him, the one trying so hard not to cry, she gave up everything for me. Her comfort, her dreams, her time, just so I could have a better life. And I looked back at the crowd, my expression no longer soft at all. And tonight, you made her feel like she didn't belong. No one spoke, no one moved, and then I turned toward Ethan, and the moment our eyes met, I saw it, not confidence, not control, but something much weaker. And you, I said quietly. I looked at you, I waited for you to say something, to stop this, to stand up for me, for my family. I paused, letting that moment hang between us, but you didn't. His face changed, the smile gone, replaced with something uncertain. You stood there and laughed, and that hit harder than anything else I had said, and I took one small step forward, my voice colder now. So let me make this very clear. A man who's ashamed of where I come from is not someone I can spend my life with. A wave of gasps spread across the hall, whispers rising instantly, and Ethan took a step toward me, trying to speak. Clara, wait, but I raised my hand, stopping him completely. No, I said firmly, and the silence returned again, thicker this time, and then I allowed myself a small, controlled smile. But that's not the only thing you should be worried about. Confusion spread quickly, people glancing at each other, and I slowly turned toward his parents, locking eyes with them. You spent the entire night deciding where my family belongs. I paused deliberately. Now it's time you understand. Where you stand, the tension in the room became almost unbearable. And then I continued, my voice calm, almost too calm. The firm that holds a major stake in your company, I let the words hang for a moment, watching their reactions carefully. Belongs to me. For a second, no one reacted, like the words hadn't fully registered, and then the room shifted, whispers breaking out. People pulling out their phones, checking, searching, and Ethan's father stepped forward quickly, his voice sharp with disbelief. That's impossible. And I looked at him without even the slightest hint of doubt. Is it? I replied calmly. You know the company, you know the contracts, but you never thought to find out who owns it. His expression faltered, just for a second, and that was all it took, because someone near the front suddenly spoke, up, almost in shock, confirming it, and the atmosphere changed instantly. Panic replacing arrogance, and I continued without raising my voice. Starting tomorrow, my firm will begin withdrawing every investment from your business. And this time the reaction was immediate. Sharp gasps, frantic whispers, people turning to each other, calculating, realizing what that meant, and I tilted my head slightly, watching it all unfold. And when that happens, we'll see how strong your reputation really is without the support you've been relying on. Ethan's mother took a step back, her face pale, his father completely stunned, and Ethan. He said nothing because there was nothing left to say, and I took a slow breath, feeling none of the chaos around me, only clarity. And then I reached up and removed my wedding ring, the small movement feeling louder than anything else in that silent room, and I placed it gently on the table beside me. This wedding, I said, looking at Ethan one last time, is over, and the shock that followed spread instantly. But I didn't wait, I didn't hesitate. I simply turned and walked away from the stage, away from the noise, straight toward the back of the hall, toward the only people who truly mattered, my parents. My mother looked up at me with tear-filled eyes, and I gently wiped her tears without saying anything. Then I held my father's hand, steady and strong. Let's go home, I said softly. And he didn't speak, but his grip tightened, and together we walked through the same crowd that had laughed just moments ago, now completely silent. No one stopping us, no one daring to say a word, and just before reaching the door, I paused for a brief second, not turning back, but making sure my voice carried clearly one last time. I would rather walk away from everything than stand beside people who don't understand respect. And then I walked out, leaving behind the lights, the lies, and the people who had just lost far more than they ever expected.